I'm Bruce Fenner, Director of Extension Ministries and Pastoral Care with the United Methodist Endorsing Agency, oftentimes referred to as UMEA. It's a part of the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry. The church has over 1,600 endorsed clergy serving in chaplaincy and pastoral care settings. They possess outstanding skills and gifts of leadership that have earned significant respect within the organizations they serve. They render that care in outstanding ways with those communities they serve. One of our tasks as an agency is to connect their leadership and wisdom with local faith communities. One of the ways we accomplish this is through webinars such as this. Of great concern today is the impact of war upon military service personnel and their families. In fact, as we read the headlines of today, suicide amongst military personnel is on a record pace. Unemployment for those entering the civilian workforce after military service is over 12%. There is a high rate of homelessness amongst returning veterans. All of this is compounded by the wounds of war. While there are significant resources available for active duty service members, the support for reservists and National Guard is lacking, and the scarcity of these resources is magnified greatly within rural areas. How can the church and community strengthen its support for reservists and National Guard service personnel and their families as they reunite and reintegrate back into the community? Our objective today is to strengthen your understanding of the intense challenges and oftentimes deep woundedness resulting from war. You will develop techniques and strategies to identify need and marshal resources to assist in healthy reintegration. Bringing leadership today is Commander Sheibeler, United States Navy Chaplaincy Reserves. Shelly is an ordained elder within the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference. She has served with the U.S. Navy Chaplaincy Reserves for over 26 years. Shelly, we are grateful for your passionate leadership, ministry, and the service you offer and render in the name of Christ and the United Methodist Church. You really care for those who are entrusted to your care. We thank you for that, and we thank you for your leadership and wisdom you offer us today.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I am so grateful to you and to the entire United Methodist denomination for creating this program whereby we're going to be educating the churches on how to reach out to our warriors that have returned from the war zone. There's a crisis of care, as you've already noted, and we need our churches to be able to step up for our reservists that live throughout the country, in these rural areas especially, and need help and support. I'm passionate about this subject as the last 3 years I spent on active duty, going around the country helping warriors and their families with Marine Forces Reserve learn how to reintegrate. When a warrior deploys and goes to war, they come back changed, no matter what. But the family members also change as well as they're trying to learn how to live in the absence of the warrior. So when the warrior comes back, they need to be educated how to reintegrate. So I'm thrilled about today's subject matter as we're going to be showing you what are some of the issues the warriors are facing, and then how can you as a church reach out to these people that are silently suffering, that need help and the embrace of the Christian community to help them garner that support to move on to a new normal. So now, with these thoughts, let's begin our PowerPoint. It is a passion that I have, as you've mentioned, and I'm thrilled to be here. I thank you. I thank the United Methodist denomination for reaching out to our warriors, and I thank all of you that are here on this webinar, because we have a crisis in our hands, as Bruce has mentioned. There are so many intense challenges that these warriors and their families face. Even though it's only 1% of the population that serve in the military, I guarantee somebody in your church is related somehow to someone in the military, and the crises and the challenges and the sacrifices they make are intense, and we as the body of Christ need to reach out to them. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled you all are here to learn how you can be part of that body of Christ, reaching out to these families in need. Let me give you a brief overview where we're going to go today. First, we're going to look at some spiritual challenges, the challenges that these warriors and their families face, and who better to deal with the spiritual challenges than the church. We are the ones that is our duty to help in those times of need. I'm going to give a quick overview of the cycles of deployment, because at each phase of deployment, there's different needs, different issues that take place. We'll look at the issues that happen when warriors return from the war zone, the different kinds of issues that are there, the injuries that are common to them. And then I'm going to give you an assessment tool. This assessment tool will be a tool to assess levels of stress. It's not just for military. You can use this on your family. You can use it in your congregation. It's an incredible tool created by the Navy and Marine Corps. And then finally, we're going to look at how the church can reach out, how they can help. So as we begin today, let me give you some statistics that are just overwhelming. First of all, it's important to realize that many reservists and National Guardsmen have been on multiple tours. They have been deployed to the war zone several times, many 3 and even 4 times. You can only imagine the intensity of what that's like. Over 6,600 have died. 48,000 plus have sustained war injuries. What's incredible nowadays is the body armor that people are wearing. Their entire torso is protected. Years past, with prior wars, we would have many, many more deaths. But because of this body armor, we now have so many injuries with amputations of arms and legs because of what's gone on. So the injuries are intense. 45,000 people have earned Purple Hearts. 633,000 have service-connected disabilities. They come home and have to struggle with these disabilities, with what they're facing, be they physical, emotional, psychological. There's many, many struggles that they have. But this next one is one of the main reasons why I'm so passionate. It has been said that many, many people are committing suicide, but there's probably more people that will die by suicide than were killed in the entire war. That's a horrific number to look at. We have people suffering in our congregations, in our communities, that need to have someone reach out to them to help them because these suicide rates are so hard. And finally, all warriors will experience a challenge as they try to put their lives back together. When you go away to war, you come back changed. You are a different person no matter what happens. But also, the family members change. As you try to adjust with that warrior being gone, everybody changes. So there's many issues when they try to come back together. But let me give you a caveat. Most veterans do well if they're connected to a loving family and a welcoming community, like a warm, welcoming parish. Many people will do well. They might have some mild symptoms of post-traumatic stress, but with time, with care, with getting some help and assistance, they can do well. They might have core values that are tied to the life of service, a deep connection to the units, to their families, and so they can do well. I don't want you to think every single veteran that comes back is broken, wounded, and falling to pieces. However, we do need to know that there are many, many challenges that our veterans are facing. You just need to get to know your veterans to find out how they are and how they're doing. So let's start by looking at the spiritual injury. The spiritual injury that occurs in military service. First of all, the exposure that these people face, what they're exposed to, we can't even fathom what they're exposed to over there. It's different cultures, different morals, different religions, and it may require acts of violence that have been specifically prohibited by their own religious tradition, and it results in spiritual injury. The exposure to this civilians becoming part of the military. Women and children are used in these wars, and it's horrific. So that exposure is very intense. Military personnel, this is fascinating. They and their families rank religious organizations second only to family when it comes to providing helpful non-military support. They want the church to rally around them. They want the church to be that body that's going to support them. So that's important to know. They want the church to be there for them. People suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the recent conflicts, they are twice as likely as the general public to believe that God's punishing them for their sins or their lack of spirituality. With everything they're going through, God feels so distant. They're also 4 times as likely as the general public to believe God's abandoned them. They struggle so much internally, psychologically, emotionally. They're lacking sleep in so many different ways, and they just think God's abandoned them because of the things they had to do or they didn't do and they should have done. So they're feeling so abandoned by God all over. Also, there's moral and spiritual injury, and those are invisible injuries. They often go undetected because veterans carry so much guilt and shame. It makes it difficult to discuss these injuries. We're going to talk at length about moral injury a little bit later today. But so often, with the internal struggles of the guilt and the shame that they have, they hide it. They don't want anyone to see it. Families and military personnel often feel forgotten. They feel invisible in the faith communities because the church members, the church is simply unaware of the trials that military members face. It's 1% of the population serve in the military. And so often it's like it's a foreign language. People don't know what's going on, and so they don't know how to approach the people. They don't even ask them anything because it's such a foreign thing because you don't have any military experience. Well, because of that, these people are feeling alone, isolated, and forgotten. And the abandonment they feel all over the place. The families, when they're deployed, they're just not part of any cycle that's going to help them, especially in the rural communities. So they need so much help. The families and military personnel often feel forgotten in their faith communities because many times the churches are opposed to war. And they think that if they help these people in their spiritual needs of the military personnel, that means they're going to be supporting the war. That's not it at all. That people are afraid to reach out, even no matter what the views are on war, they need people to support them through it. This is something that they believe God's called them to do. So no matter what the church's stance is, they just need people to come alongside them because there are people in our community that are hurting. And 8, the pain of spiritual injury and moral distress in the military personnel can be so severe that it leads to alcohol or drug usage to cover up all the suffering. The suicide attempts may be efforts to escape the spiritual suffering altogether. Alcohol flows like water. The use of alcohol to anesthetize all the pain is way too common. And so often the combination of alcohol and riding their motorcycles equals death one too many times. That they just want to escape and get away. And they're utilizing drugs and alcohol to anesthetize all the pain and the intense struggles they have inside. The local faith communities can become healing agents for these families and for the military personnel. It only takes one person to connect with the people to say, hey, how are you? I'm here for you. How can I help? We need our faith communities to reach out to these silent sufferers that are in our communities. And there's many resources that we have that can help you reach out to these people. Now, real briefly, I'm going to go through the transitions. And Bruce will talk later. You'll see other additions to this webinar where you can find more information. But briefly, there's 3 different stages that people go through when they're getting ready to deploy for the whole deployment cycle for reservists. With a pre-deployment, that's when you get notification you're about to be deployed. For the warrior, they train their entire lives. They're training their entire lives to be that warrior. It's all about how to be the lean, mean, fighting machine. But rarely, if ever, in their training are they taught how to, quote, come home. The training is how to be the warrior, how to be the soldier. During pre-deployment for families, there's a variety of emotions. And I can imagine, the first emotion they have is, will my warrior come home alive? They are just terrified. That's the biggest fear that they have. And so there's chaos that begins to happen when there's so much stress. Instead of coming together, couples usually have arguments and things because that's how they're working out their stress. During the deployment phase, the warriors become that warrior. When we deploy, it's like we put our armor on. If we put it on emotionally and psychologically, we have to harden our hearts to focus on the mission at hand. It is 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and we're so focused that we've got to have it all together to be able to do the mission. This is life and death that we're dealing with. There is stress with this modern-day issue of technology, with Skype, with emails, with things like that. The family at home wants to tell us about the hot water heater breaking down. It's not that we don't care. We don't have the ability to care. It's not on our radar. We still love them, but we just can't show them that care, and that creates a disconnect for the families. For reservists, this is highly important. When people go on active duty, so often the reservists do not know what resources are available to them. That they need ID cards, there's medical benefits, there's all sorts of benefits, but so often they're never educated in it. They get lost. All their civilian things drop from the wayfront because they're no longer in that civilian job from their spouse, and then they don't know the resources that are there, so they get lost and so often face severe financial crisis. With post-deployment, when they come home, this is what we're going to look at most today. The warriors need to drop that armor that they put on, but nobody teaches us how to do it. They just come home with it, and they're still operating as if they're at war. For the family, they need to adjust to what we call a new normal. The family has changed while they've been away. The warriors changed, and they're never going to be the same. So it's like starting all over again. They need to learn what the new normal is all about. So, what are some of the challenges of return? Let's look at this. They've been away at war for a year, 14 months, sometimes longer, and you can imagine everybody's excited. Everybody's thrilled for 3 months. You're looking forward to that day of return, the moment of return. The excitement is building, the intensity. They're just so excited about it. But then you have these hidden, invisible wounds, the post-war trauma and stress, the depression, anxiety, domestic problems, substance abuse. These things start to unravel soon after coming home. Another major challenge is a crisis of care. There's a crisis in our Veterans Center. We've probably heard how backlogged the VA system is, even with all the Vietnam veterans. So trying to get care is very, very tough for our veterans. I know personally with the warriors when they come home, when they have to out-process from coming home from the war zone, so often they're just pushed through the system, and if they have ailments or injuries, they're just told, hey, the VA will take care of it. And they should be getting to take care of before they go home, but they don't. They get pushed out the door. They've got illnesses. They've got injuries that aren't attended to, and then they're out on the street by themselves. And so there is a major crisis facing our people today because there is not the availability of care that they need, especially if they're in rural areas. They might have to drive 3, 4, 5 hours to try to find some place to begin to get assistance. We need the church to step forward. there's a Christian psychologist, Larry Crabb, and I love his work. He pretty much was ostracized by the Christian counseling community because he basically threw out most of his counseling concepts that he held for many years. And he said, most people will not need counseling or therapy if they can only feel connected. If you feel connected, accepted, and unconditional love from one person, you can do anything. We need the church to step forward to feel connected. So, as we move on, I want you to imagine, some of you may have been on mission trips before where you've experienced some intensity of suffering or poverty. You know how hard it was when you got home. It was overwhelming. I know I took mission trips to Appalachia with my youth group for the coal mining communities, and we lived there for a week. And I remember one time walking into Walmart at the end of the week and how overwhelmed I was by everything that was there, because these people had nothing. Multiply that 1,000-fold, because these people have been in these zones for at least a year. There are many, many challenges for these people to reintegrate, to get back into the civilian life. First of all, there's a short preparation time. With World War II, it would take them over a month to come home on the ships. And what do you think they were doing while they're on the ships? They're kibbutzing back and forth. They're telling stories. They're telling war stories. They're laughing. They're grieving. They're walking through all the things. It's a therapeutic time as they tell all their stories, as they process, as they get it out of their system. Now, you can be in Iraq one day, and 24 hours later, you're on American soil. And then within several days, you can be through the processing center and back home. It happens so fast that it leads to feelings of culture shock and sometimes psychological immobility. It just happens so fast. Another issue is Currier and Ives expectations. You know, everybody dreams of that fantastic reunion. The sailor kissing the woman in Times Square. I'm going home. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be like it was. Not. It lasts very, very short. It does not happen. The family system has changed while they've been away. Different people take on different roles. There's a lot of changes that occur, and they have to be educated on how to readjust. Another huge issue is the slow pace of life. These guys and gals are operating on dopamine and adrenaline. They're going 14, 16 hours a day. It's life and death. There's an intensity that they live with for an entire year. It never slows down. Back at home, the things that used to be fun are dull and boring. That it's just, they just can't adjust to it because it just seems like everything is so slow. Depression often sets in. So often they'll begin to experience risky behaviors to get that dopamine and adrenaline flowing once again. I know I had a Marine come up to me and said he went for a bike ride. I'm thinking, great. He went, he got some exercise, that's great. He was going 120 miles an hour on his motorcycle down the highway. He was getting his dopamine and adrenaline and all those biochemicals flowing once again. They do these risky behaviors because they were living on the edge and it's a high that they experienced. There's also a loss of intimacy that they might be grieving. They can be grieving for their companions that they lost. Many have lost companions during this war. But there's also a loss of intimacy from being with these people. We cannot begin to understand the bonds that these people develop. When you're 24/7, eating, living, breathing together, facing life and death nonstop, there is a bond and an intimacy that we cannot imagine. I know I have a friend. He had been deployed for a year and, had that Currier and Ives moment. The wife was on the tarmac. The kids waiting for the husband, brings tears to your eyes thinking about it. Got off, kissed her, welcomed her, hugged her, the kids, spent like 10 minutes. Said, honey, I'll be right back. He went into the hangar with the guys, and he was there for like an hour and a half. The wife was so depressed, like, what happened? He couldn't say goodbye to his friends. The loss of that intimacy was overwhelming. It was a shock. Then we have issues of the old job, returning to work. For many people, they don't have a job to go back to. Even though your job is supposed to be guaranteed as a reservist, with this economy, many jobs have disappeared. So they're gone to begin with. Or if they go back to their old jobs, what used to give them satisfaction now can be a completely different experience. It can give them complete boredom. Or they have so many psychological issues going on, they might get angry or rageful for no reason in their present workplace, and it's difficult readjusting. Also, because as I've talked about, there's been many, many deployments, people are tired. They are fatigued. They are so tired from trying to readjust when they've had to go back to war so many times. They're tired out. They're absolutely tired out. The final thing with the challenge is the availability of services. In these rural areas, as we said, there are very, very few resources. That's why we need you all that are on this webinar, to reach out in these rural areas, to connect with these people, because you might be the life-connecting source that will keep this person alive, because there's very few resources in the rural areas. So that's important.